All right, good morning, Uplift Church. I always love it. Sabrina's always the cheerleader, getting everybody excited and motivated. It's great. And I hope you guys are motivated, excited on a finally cool day. We've just not had that many. And I think sometimes we expect things to go one way and it goes another. And that always happens on Thanksgiving. And I know many of you, and I'm just curious, if you're all doing something this week for Thanksgiving with your intermediate family, with extended family, whatever, just raise, you're doing something with Thanksgiving, just raise your hand up. Wow. Okay, so we're all doing something. All right, now we get these ideas in our head. You know, we're going to eat at such and such time. We're going to have such and such ready. So-and-so's bringing something, so-and-so's bringing something else, and everybody's going to come together, and everybody's going to smile and get along. First of all, you forgot to thaw the turkey. So now it's froze. Your sister's running late. Your brother forgot to make the cake balls. And you just forgot to buy, the fine china and the plastic forks and everything. So now you're going to have extra dishes, and it's just like, it just never works out that right. Because we get these ideas conceived in our mind, and things don't go that way. And what we start doing is making excuses, and we'll find somebody to blame. Well, if you would have been here on time, then, Thanksgiving would have went smoother. If you would have done this, or if you would have done this. And I'm excited about Thanksgiving. I love Thanksgiving. I probably love Thanksgiving just as much, if not more, than Christmas. I love Thanksgiving. And I know that this week I'm going to eat good. We've got 2 Thanksgivings to do, and we've got 2 big turkeys in our refrigerator thawing out right now. I'm excited about that. I'm excited about eating my sister's deviled eggs. I'm excited about eating my sister-in-law. She makes this like broccoli slaw casserole thing. It's like really, really good. My sister also makes this killer sweet potato casserole. It is delicious. And I'm hoping that my wife will make another cake because last week's was absolutely amazing. And we're hoping that things will go this way. But oftentimes, what happens when it don't? We could put so much emphasis on having our house clean. We can put so much emphasis on having all the appearance that everything is together. But for the fact of the matter is, none of us are actually together. Okay, we don't have it all together. Sometimes we give off the impression that we do, and we want our house to be, perfect. We want everything just to be nice and neat. We even make our kids clean up their rooms that nobody ever goes to. But just in case somebody does, it will be clean. And you parents are smiling because you make your kids do it too. And we have these ideas of what things go on. And then we have these traditions. Our house, we have this weird, funny tradition. We'll eat together, and then afterwards we play this game. We'll all gather around the TV and we'll play this game called Just Dance, and you're holding this Wii remote and you're doing all these dance moves. And we even get my brother-in-law, Tony, he does it, and my kids, we all do this, and it's fun. It's just fun, and I don't know how that got started, but we just started doing that, and now it's a tradition. Maybe you got some of your own family traditions going on, but there's also some little bit negative family traditions, because maybe you're kind of dreading this year, or maybe you don't like being around such and such, or maybe you thought, man, this Thanksgiving would be perfect if we had to deal with Cousin Eddie. Something. And we kind of get these ideas that things are going to turn out all right, and when it doesn't, we start making excuses, or we'll start blaming other people. Like, well, you just don't understand what my family's like. You don't understand what my marriage is like. You don't understand what my kids are like. You don't understand, what this whole happens in our house from day to day and week to week. You just don't understand. And Tony already said this earlier. Is God not so much bigger than everything else? I think so many times what we lack is that we compartmentalize God. We put Him in a small compartment, and then we expect everything else to go our way. And when things don't go our way, we get frustrated. We lash out. We can hurt people. And oftentimes we hurt ourselves. And you may be here today and you may be like, wait, my family is dysfunctional. Who ain't? We're all messed up people. We all have something that is we're not necessarily ashamed of, but we just don't want other people to see about our families, or we just don't exactly tell. But whenever you turn it around, man, we're just a big ball of mess. A big ball of mess. And so what do we do with this? Do we just make excuses? Do we just make excuses for everybody else? Or do we do something different? See, I think God has God has just got total blessing. The Bible teaches that He can just open up the windows of heaven and just pour out His blessings upon us. But then, why don't we get that? Why don't we hear from God when all this other stuff is going on? Why can't we hear from God? And what we'll start doing, we'll start blaming other people for our own problems. And you may be here today like, man, my family, we're a mess, and we just grew up in a mess and all that. And maybe so. But you're not the only one to suffer from this. You can see in the Bible, I cannot find a single example of a perfect family. I can't do it. It's not there. I can't find the perfect example of a perfect marriage. I just can't find it. Because we're all struggling. We're all dealing with some kind of sin. And we're all trying to get just as close to God as we possibly can. And I don't know what you're facing this week. I don't know. We all said that we're doing something with Thanksgiving. And maybe you're having a really hard time right now just finding something to be thankful for. See, I think so many times on Thanksgiving, what we're seeking after is the wrong thing. So I'm totally convinced that you do not need to hear a word from me, that you don't need a certain translation of the Bible, you don't need a certain dress attire. What we need, what this world needs, is a word from God above anything else. And what we start doing, we start blaming our own relationship with God. We blame that on other people. We start making excuses. There's a story I want to share with you, and this is in 1 Samuel chapter 2. It's in the Old Testament. And here's this man that had such a stressful time at his house. He just lived in a stressful household. And maybe that's you. You live in a stressful household. Or maybe you put so much stress and so much emphasis on everybody else so that they will act the way you want them to. Or that they will do what you want them to. That they'll actually be on time because you want them to. In the story, you're going to see how in amongst all this chaos, God still spoke. And He spoke to a unique individual. I think this is awesome. This is in 1 Samuel chapter 2. And this is just an amazing, powerful story. It starts in verse 11, is what we're going to read at today. It says, Then Elkanah returned home to Ramah without Samuel. And the boys served the Lord by assisting Eli the priest. Now, Elkanah was this boy Samuel's dad. Samuel's parents were Elkanah and Hannah. And if you start reading the first chapter of 1 Samuel, what you're going to see is that Hannah couldn't have a child. They tried and tried and tried. They were just struck with infertility. They just couldn't have a child. And she went to church one day, and Eli was there, the priest, and her husband. And she got on her knees, and she just started crying out to God. She sobbed. When the priest saw her, he thought, because she was mumbling these prayers, he thought she was drunk. But what she was actually doing was saying, God, if you will bless me with a child, I will give him back to you. After that, God heard her prayer. She became pregnant, and they had a son, named him Samuel. And after she weaned him, and he grew up just a little bit, she took him to the church and said, okay, Eli the priest, here's the promise I made to God, and here's Samuel. And so what you read there in verse 11 is they left and went back home and left their young boy at church with Eli the priest. And this is where he lived. And what he was in training to do is that he worked at the church. He was in line to be a priest. He was a prophet. He was going to do the works of the church along with this man named Eli and Eli's 2 sons. And it looks like that this would be the picture-perfect place for him to grow up in. But it was not so. Look at verse 12, 13. It says, Now the sons of Eli were scoundrels who had no respect for the Lord or for the duties as priest. Now, I don't know if you've ever referred to anyone as a scoundrel, but that's exactly what the Bible refers to these people as. Now keep in mind that Samuel lived in this house. Samuel lived in this house with these 2 sons and this priest. And the 2 sons were just flat out wicked. Just utterly wicked. And so everything was not rocking at his house. It was not always pleasant. And it goes on to detail a little bit about what they did. This is in verse 16. They were kind of like bullies. It says, The man offering the sacrifice might reply, Take as much as you want, but the fat must be burned first. Then the servant would demand, "No, give it to me now, or I'll take it by force." So the sin of these young men was very serious in the Lord's sight, for they treated the Lord's offerings with contempt. Then here's what they would do. Back then, whenever you went to church, you had to bring a sacrifice. And how the priest and his family were fed is that once the sacrifice was done and given to God, they would take a portion of the meat and they would eat it. Well, what Eli's sons were doing is that they were just going up and not waiting until it was their time. They were just going in and just taking all that they could have. And what they were doing is that they were corrupting the sacrifice that was to God. And the Bible refers to as them being scoundrels. It says that he would take it by force. They would force these people to give over their food, give over this sacrifice. They would force it. And you may know this, but anytime you have to force somebody to do something that they don't want to do, the outcome is never good. It's just not. Now sometimes with our kids, we force them to do it. We force them to clean their room. We force them to take a bath. We force them to brush their teeth. We're like, "Man, why do I got to take a bath?" It's because you stink. And we force our kids to do this. So I'm not talking about it as from a parent standpoint, but I am talking about from our family standpoint. Because you may have this thing that you do. It's like, okay, here's what we're going to do this year. You may say, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to set everybody down and we give the guidelines. All right, so we'll tell, our brother or sister or parents, listen, so-and-so's coming. I want you to behave. You're not going to say anything negative. And I better not hear a single complaint about anybody's food. And we'll start giving these guidelines that you're going to do this, 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 and this. We're trying to force their hand. And I think sometimes what we really want to do is that we just want to tie people up so that they'll act and behave the way that we want them to. And so we'll just force them to do this. And this is a pretty good rope. It's a tree climbing rope. And so you could take this rope and you could wrap it around here and wrap somebody up in it and say, okay, you're going to sit here and you're going to have a good time and you're going to like it, whether you like it or not. And they were trying to be forceful. And that's what they were doing. They were bullies, and they were trying to be forceful with this and take for themselves because they were only thinking about themselves. Now this Thanksgiving, are you thinking about yourself or are you thinking about everybody as a whole? We put so much emphasis on the presentation. We put so much emphasis on making sure that everything is clean, everything looks good, and we can totally miss the time with our family. Where does God fit in all this? So here you've got these people that are forcing them to give them food. They're forcing this behavior. Where's God? And here you've got Samuel. Young Samuel, who's just a small boy, who's living in the same house. He's going to the same church. And it's not good for everybody else, but it was for Samuel. Look at verse 18. It says, "But Samuel, though he was only a boy, served the Lord. He wore a linen garment like that of a priest, and each year his mother made a small coat for him and brought it to him when she came with her husband for the sacrifice. Before they returned home, Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife and say, 'May the Lord give you other children to take the place of the one she gave to the Lord.'" And I love verse 21. "And the Lord blessed Hannah, and she conceived and gave birth to 3 sons and 2 daughters. Meanwhile, Samuel grew up in the presence of the Lord." Now, I love this. So first of all, there's a couple things that happened here. We know that Samuel was a small boy and he was left at the church to serve God. And there at this house was the priest. His name was Eli, and Eli's 2 sons who were scoundrels. They were wicked. And even though they performed all this wickedness, it says in that last verse that Samuel grew up in the presence of the Lord. Samuel grew up in the presence of the Lord, even though he was surrounded by so much evil. Even though in his house, it was not peaceful. I'm imagining living with these 2 brothers, that they were bullies. I very seriously doubt they respected any authority from their father, Eli. Anytime they were asked to do something, I believe these were the ones that were talking back. "No, I'm not going to. Make me. You make me do it." And just talking back, this unhealthy, it was just an unbelievable, stressful family. But yet, Samuel grew up in the presence of the Lord. Now, how could he grow up in the presence of the Lord surrounded by these scoundrels? I heard a a preacher that speak at this graduation event several years ago, and he said, "You will never soar with the eagles when you're surrounded by turkeys." You'll never soar with the eagles when you're surrounded by turkeys. Now, I like to eat turkey, but I don't want to be a turkey. If I could have my choice, I want to soar like an eagle, not gobble like a turkey. So what's the point? How do we do that? How can we hear from God? How can we soar above everything else? How can we be like Samuel? What was it that he did differently? His household was not pleasant. And you may say, well, you don't understand my house. Maybe your house, maybe you can relate to this. People didn't get along. Verse 22. It says, "Now Eli was very old, but he was aware of what his sons were doing to the people of Israel. He knew, for instance, that his sons were seducing the young women who assisted at the entrance of the tabernacle." Now, this is how wicked this was. I mean, they were seducing these women who were there. Verse 23, "Then Eli said to them, I have been hearing reports from all the people about the wicked things you are doing. Why do you keep sinning?" Verse 24, "You must stop, my sons. The reports I hear among the Lord's people are not good. If someone sins against another person, God can mediate for the guilty party. But if someone sins against the Lord, who can intercede?" But Eli's sons wouldn't listen to their father, for the Lord was already planning to put them to death. Now here's how wicked these men were. That God was looking to put them to death. Look at how wicked they were. Now, Eli, the father of all this, he tried a little bit. He did tell his sons, now, don't do that. You need to stop. Have you ever seen somebody else trying to discipline their kids? You're like, man, what they need is you know. And I'm just going to say this. As parents, you have full authority to discipline your kids. Now, make sure it's your own kids. You do not have authority to discipline other people's kids. Now, sometimes you may want to, especially at Walmart. There's always somebody at Walmart that needs a thrashing or whatever. They need discipline. Here, as parents, we have full authority to discipline our children. And here's where we see this example of what Eli's doing. Guys, I'm hearing what you're doing. Don't do that. And I think their reply is, yeah, Dad, okay. Okay. I mean, I think they was giving this smart out remark. He was just trying to tell them what to do. Man, they just wouldn't do it. And Eli, he just let it go. Have you ever talked back to your parents? Man, I have. And it didn't turn out well for me. I don't think it turned out well for my parents either, because I remember my parents, they'd be the ones, they would end up crying. They'd be more upset than what I would be. It's no fun doing discipline. And there's times that I probably should have been beat when I wasn't. I've said this example several times. There was this one Sunday morning that we were getting ready for church. And I was listening to this band Metallica, and maybe you're familiar with them. I was listening to Metallica, and this one particular song was called One, and I was listening to it, and I had my strap up a little bit loud, and I'll never forget, my dad opened the door, and he said, "Son, I don't like your choice of music." And I said, "That's okay, Dad, I don't like yours either." He should have beat me, but instead he just shut the door, and he went on. I went, oh my, I can't believe I just said that. So I went over and turned it down. I just turned it off. Okay, we're going to end this up. Because I had respect for my dad. Even though I said that I should have been beat, I respected him and turned it down and quit doing what I was doing. But these men, they did not. They continued. They continued in this lifestyle of wickedness and sin and evil. All amongst, while there's this small boy who lived there named Samuel. And even though he was surrounded by all these turkeys, all this wickedness, all this evil, he still grew up in the presence of the Lord. And it says that what God was getting ready to do is that he was planning on taking their life. He was planning on taking their life. That's how bad these people were. Verse 26, it says, "Meanwhile, while all this is going on, even though all this evil is going on, even though they're forcing, and even though they're seducing these women, even though they're behaving every way that they should not," verse 26, it says, "Meanwhile, while all that was going on, the boy Samuel grew taller and grew in favor with the Lord and with the people." Now, I love this. In amongst all this, meanwhile, while all this is going on, they're forcing people to act like this. They're not getting along, and there's arguing. There's not peace at the church house. There's not peace. All this sin, all this stuff that Samuel's surrounded by, it's not a good environment. But even though all that was going on, he was hearing from God. Samuel was growing up. He was getting closer to God. Now, he had the perfect excuse to blame things on. God, I would get closer to you if my brothers wasn't such scoundrels. Nobody likes me because of my brothers. You see what they're doing. I'm staying here with them. I know they're not my blood brothers, but we're here. We're brothers. And then start behaving this way. And he could start giving these excuses. You may be the same thing. Well, our family would be perfect. It just wasn't for so-and-so. Or so-and-so would just act like this and everything would be okay. And we start pointing the blame. When really what we need to be asking is, what can I do? How can I hear from God? How can I make a difference? In all this chaos, he is the only one that's getting closer to God. And he's just a small boy. This small boy is getting closer to God, while Eli the priest and his two sons are getting further and further away. Where are you at in this? Are you the one who's hearing from God and getting closer to God? Or are you not any closer to God than what you were 6 months ago or a year ago? You may think, well, yeah, but you don't know what I've been through. Like, I've been through all this stuff, and we lost a baby this year, or we had to bury my dad, or we start blaming other people for our problems. We start blaming things on our families. And look at the excuses here that Samuel could have used. And we don't hear him make a single excuse. Instead, he's getting closer and closer and closer to God. That's where I want to be. Where do you want to be? Do you want this family full of chaos, or despite all this, get closer to God? See, I think that no matter what you're going through, despite your hardships, despite your trouble, despite your family, you can still have an unbelievable, close and intimate relationship with God where you can hear from Him. This relationship with Samuel kept on going. And in this house where these scoundrels lived this boy Samuel. And if you turn over to the next chapter, chapter 3, meanwhile, while this was still going on, while all this wickedness was still going on, meanwhile, the boy Samuel served the Lord by assisting Eli. Now in those days, messages from the Lord were very rare and visions were quite uncommon. And you'll see this all throughout the Old Testament where God would speak, sometimes through dreams and these visions. He spoke to Moses through a burning bush. And it had been a long time since anybody had heard from God. A long time. A long time. Now look at verse 2. So one night Eli, who was almost blind now, had gone to bed. The lamp of God had not gone out yet, and Samuel was sleeping in the tabernacle near the ark of God. Suddenly the Lord called out, "Samuel." "Yes," Samuel replied, "what is it?" And he got up and he ran to Eli and he said, "Here I am. Did you call me?" He says, "I didn't call you," Eli replied. "Go back to bed." And so he did. So God is starting to speak to Samuel, and Samuel didn't recognize the voice. He thought it was Eli. So then he got up and he ran to Eli and said, What did you need? I'm here." He says, I didn't call you. Go back to bed. Verse 6, then the Lord called out again, "Samuel." And again Samuel got up and he went to Eli and he said, "Here I am. Did you call me?" And he said, "I didn't call you, my son." Eli said, "Go back to bed." Samuel did not know the Lord because he had never had a message from the Lord before. Verse 8, so the Lord called a third time. And once more Samuel got up and went to Eli and he said, "Here I am. Did you call me?" Then Eli realized it was the Lord who was calling the boy. So he said to Samuel, "Go lie down, and if someone calls again, say, 'Speak, Lord.'" I love this. "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." So Samuel went back to bed. So 3 times Samuel heard the voice of God, and he wasn't familiar with it. He had never heard it before. And he went to Eli thinking it was him. "Eli, did you call me? What did you need?" And 3 times Eli gave the same answer. "No, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. Go back to bed." But this third time was when Eli realized, oh, this must be God speaking. So the next time you hear this voice, say, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. So Samuel goes back to bed. This is verse 10. And the Lord came and called as before, Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel replied, Speak, your servant is listening. I love this. In this same household, in this same house, where you have these two wicked, these brothers, they're just full of wickedness. In the same house, you got Eli the priest, and the only one who's hearing a word from God is a small boy named Samuel. Now, why is that? Why is Samuel the only one who's hearing from God? When all these other men who have all the qualifications, who have all the right credentials, who live in the right family, they're in the right tribe of the priesthood. They've got everything lined up for them, but yet they're not hearing from God. Only a small boy hears from God. Why is that? And I want you to listen to this, and I don't want you to miss this at all. You're stressful about your Thanksgiving, and you're stressful about the things that's going on in the world right now. All we've heard since the election is all this rioting and people that are not together, and we need this togetherness, and you're concerned about that. You're concerned about your family and Thanksgiving, what's going to happen this week. You're concerned about your job and your future. The best thing that we can do, the most important thing we can do over Thanksgiving, over this time in our life, is seek to hear a word from God. So then why is Samuel hearing from God and nobody else is? Now, this is what I want you to get. Because Samuel is the only one seeking God. Samuel's the only one seeking God. You're only going to hear from God when you're seeking God. And Samuel was seeking after God. Now, you can tune things out. You can just, men are really good at this, and you don't even realize it, but you can be watching something on TV and your wife or kids, they can be speaking to you about something, you have no idea what they said. You're watching the game, you're watching this movie, whatever, you're watching it. I'm really guilty of this when I'm driving down the road. I'm just driving in my own little world. I'm singing something in my head, whatever, and then somebody's speaking to me, and I have no idea. And Amanda, she's like, Patrick, and I'm in my own world. And she finally slaps me and says, the girls are talking to you. And I didn't hear them. Speak up. They said, they're screaming your name. Because I wasn't seeking to hear from them. I was in my own little world, minding my own business, doing my own thing. And I missed hearing from my kids. I wonder how many times we do that in our own lives with God. We get so busy and so wrapped up in everything, and when things don't go our way, we start blaming everybody else when maybe we started to look at our own lives. Because the most important thing that could happen to us is to hear a word from God. Samuel heard a word from God, and that is the most important thing. And yet, he's just a small boy. And he's hearing from God because he's one who's seeking God. What are we seeking after? Are you seeking for the perfect Thanksgiving? Maybe you had a Thanksgiving that you experienced younger when you grew up. Is this a Thanksgiving you'll never forget? I've had several of those. I'm sure you have too. And maybe you're just trying to relive those glory days. You're trying to make it just like Granny made it. You're trying to make it just like it was back then. And you're putting so much stress on all your family. You're trying to strap them down and say, listen, you're going to do it this way and this way and this way. And we're completely leaving God out of all of this. And that's what happened to these two brothers, Hophni and Phinehas, and Eli, their dad. They were trying to please themselves, do things their way, living this life of wickedness and sin. And they'd never heard a word from God. What God spoke to Samuel, I love this. He said in verse 11, he said, then the Lord said to Samuel, he says, I'm about to do a shocking thing in Israel. I'm going to carry out all my threats against Eli and his family from the beginning to end. And I have warned him that this judgment is coming upon his family forever because his sons are blaspheming God. And he hasn't disciplined them yet. Remember I told you as parents, you have full authority to discipline your kids. That's important. And he hasn't disciplined them. So I have vowed that the sins of Eli and his sons will never be forgiven by sacrifices or offerings. They had done too much. Their fate has been sealed. God's going to take care of them. He's going to take care of them. Now, Samuel doesn't take things into his own hands. He doesn't force anybody else's hands. He doesn't force them to act a certain way. All Samuel does is seek to hear from God and do what He says. Just seek to hear from God and do what He says. Church, if we will do this as Christians, as parents, as leaders, as families, if we will seek God and do what He says, then we will all get along. Because God is that harmony that unites us all together. But are we seeking God? Man, but my family's a mess, my marriage is a mess. Yes, but are you seeking God? Because God can give you that guidance and direction that you need for your family. Yeah, but you just don't understand what it's like and who I live with. You know the devil, right? Yeah, I married her sister, and it's just like, it's so evil. Well, first of all, you're the one who said, I do. It's time to seek God and do what He says. Seek God and do what He says. This has kind of been our philosophy as Uplift Church ever since we got started. We're just going to seek from God. We're going to pray. We're going to fast. We're going to read Scripture. We're going to seek God and just do what He says. And very early on in our early days, we were meeting at our house in the basement, and we were going to Gate City High School once a month. And we were just asking people to come to church, 12 times a year, just one Sunday a month. And that wasn't enough, and our house started growing. And we don't have that big of a house, and trying to fit all these people in our basement, it wasn't working. We was trying to figure out what we were going to do. And so me and Right-Hand Man Super Dave, we went to this meeting at this church to meet with this guy to kind of get some ideas and suggestions. And he kept asking us questions. The meeting lasted for about an hour. And he asked Super Dave a question, and he's giving him this answer. And the guy just interrupts him. Just completely interrupts and says, wait a minute. You guys have no idea what you're doing, do you? And Super Dave said, no, we don't. All we're doing is seeking God and doing what He says. He said, then this meeting is over. I'm calling it quits. You all keep doing that. Seek God and do what He says. And he left. He prayed for us, called the meeting over, and he left. And me and Super Dave was just looking at each other like, what do we do? I guess we'll keep seeking God and doing what He says. Church, you're going to find this all throughout your Bible. You want to know what to do with your family. You want to know how to lead your family during Thanksgiving and how to keep the stress down. Seek from God and do what He says. Don't focus on your wants and your needs. If the cheesecake don't turn out perfect, it's okay. It's just cheesecake. If so-and-so shows up late, instead of harping on them and fussing on them, saying, yeah, we're eating late all because of you, like, just love on them anyway. Just seek God and do what He says. Seek God and do what He says. And what we hear from Samuel is, Samuel's getting this revelation from God about the future, what's happening. If you keep reading, what you're going to see is that Samuel lived this out. He continued to seek God and do what He said. Even though he lived in this house full that was wickedness and sorrow, so much trouble, he lived with scoundrels. Scoundrels. But yet he heard from God when nobody else did. That night when God spoke to Samuel at his house, Samuel was the only one that heard the voice of God. Eli the priest didn't hear it. The two other priests, his sons, they didn't hear it. The only one to hear from God was a small boy. And he said, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. See, church, we can't listen when we're doing all the talking. Listen to God and do what He says. Listen to God. Do what He says. You know what happened to Samuel? Look at verse 19. It says, as Samuel grew up, the Lord was with him, and everything, I love this, and everything Samuel said proved to be reliable. And all of Israel from Dan and in the north to Beersheba in the south knew that Samuel was confirmed as a prophet of the Lord. And the Lord continued to appear at Shiloh and gave message to Samuel there at the tabernacle. This was awesome. Samuel kept seeking after God, and guess what God kept doing? He kept speaking. He kept speaking. And what Samuel did is that he lived his life, whatever God said. He just listened to God and would do what he says. Just listen to God and do what he says. Listen to God and do what he says. I wonder how many of us are actually seeking God this Thanksgiving. Many times we're going to be taking the opportunity and have the opportunity to speak what we're thankful for. I'm seeing this stuff on Pinterest and Facebook and Instagram about these pictures of their family and saying so thankful, and we're thankful for so many things. And we could put so much emphasis on our family. We could put so much emphasis on that little gathering for a couple hours with some family. And we'll completely miss God's blessings on that. What would happen if we would just seek after God? Maybe you want this year to be the most memorable Thanksgiving ever. And that's why I wanted to play that video this morning, because that Thanksgiving video that you saw this morning, things didn't turn out quite the way that they wanted to. I mean, it ended up in a food fight. And they made the best of it. With us, are we putting so much stress and so much emphasis on our families and what's going to take place at our Thanksgiving dinner? Who's not going to be there? Who is going to be there? What they're wearing, what they're going to smell like, what they're cooking, what they're not cooking. Whether it's going to be on time, whether they'll be late. We're going to put so much emphasis on all these things. What if, instead of putting all of our emphasis on all these things, we say, God, I want to hear from you. What can I do this week that I may be able to show others that I'm living for you, that I'm thankful for you? Have you stopped to thank God for your family? Everybody's family, they'll drive you nuts because we spend so much time together. You just spend so much time together. We'll drive each other nuts. But I wouldn't take anything for them. Maybe you're the same way. I love my brother. I love my sister. I love their spouses. And what if we just, all these people that we love and care about, what if we just sought after God? God, what can I do this week? What can I do this week to make my family peaceful? What can I do this week to help my family hear from you? So instead of pointing fingers and blaming, instead of blaming this and blaming that, we're looking at us. What can I do to make a difference? Instead of pointing the blame at somebody else. Samuel had the perfect opportunity to point the blame at everybody else. He was like, man, if you guys wasn't so wicked, we could have a good time here. I just can't imagine what family game night would have been like at their house. And then you got these two wicked men, and they're just full of this contempt and sin. And here you got Samuel. He's just beaming. He's hearing from God. He didn't fit. He didn't jive. But he was hearing from God. And nobody else was. Can that be us? I heard a radio preacher say this week, said that the single most important thing that God can do in our lives is to use us to reach somebody for Him. So the single most important thing God could do in our lives was God use us to reach someone else. I want to be that guy. I don't want to be the household that people's dreading to come to. Man, we got to go to PJ's house and eat his stinking turkey. I make a good turkey, by the way. It is killer. I want people to enjoy being around me. What if we were that light? That light that this radio preacher was talking about. That God would use us to impact someone else. What if you're the one that could be the glue to hold everybody together, to bring everybody together? You're the centerpiece. And your attitude is going to set the stage for what everybody else is going to experience that day. So therefore, why don't we seek God and then do what He says? That's what Samuel does here. I don't know. Maybe you are so used to blaming others for all your problems. that you never look to the inside. And what I'm challenging you with this week is that you would seek God. Yes, we're going to be thankful over so many things, and we need to be thankful. We need to thank God for all these things. But what does God want to do in our life that we need to seek Him after? Because your attitude, your actions are going to reflect God's. And whatever that is, it's contagious. It spreads, good or bad. It spreads. So last night I was thinking about this very thing. Here in just a little over a week, we're getting ready to close on this building, and it will officially belong to Uplift Church, and so excited. And we've talked about this a lot of times in our own house. And my 8-year-old prayed last night as we was praying. She said, God, thank you for our church, and continue to give us money as we buy it for you. Why would an 8-year-old pray that prayer? Because we set the stage. And it's contagious. Your attitude will set the stage. Now, other people, they might not get on board with it, and they can be bitter, and they can be hateful, and they can be a grump if they want to. But over here, we're going to have a good time. We're going to seek from God, and we're just going to do what He says. And by doing so, we're going to set the stage for other people to see God in us, so that in turn they may seek God and do what He says. I'm going to ask you to bow your head and close your eyes for a moment as we pray. Father God, I pray that you would speak clearly, loud and clear to us right now. God, I know that we have so many things going on. We put so much stress on our lives. We put so much stress on our families. And right now, God, the most important thing that we could do is to hear a word from you. I want to pray for you. You're here today, and you feel like God's speaking to you. He's got things that He's wanting you to clear up. Maybe you've been putting the emphasis and the focus on so many different things. And it's time God's like, listen, I want you to forget about all those things. Forget about the perfect presentation and just seek after me. I'll give you peace. Just seek after me. I'll give you the peace. I'll give you the direction. I'll give you the words to say. Just seek after me. Maybe you're dreading this Thanksgiving week. You're dreading seeing some of the people. You're dreading that get-together. You're so dreading it. What if instead of dreading it, we just sought after God and said, God, how can I impact others' lives for you? That we would just seek God, seek to hear from God, and just do what He says. Just seek God and do what He says. I would love to have the opportunity to pray for you. If that's you today and God's leading you to that very thing, that instead of focusing on presentation, instead of focusing on this week or all the things that's got going on, that you would just seek after God. Seek to hear a word from Him and do what He says. May I pray for you? If that's you today, hands are already going up. If that's you today, you just want to seek God from this week and do what He says. Hands are going up everywhere. I want to pray for you. Seek from God and do what He says. Hands are still going up. May God bless you. Bless you. Seek God and do what He says. Seek God and do what He says. Father God, you see our hearts. You know our intentions. Whether they be full of wickedness like it was with those two men, or whether they be pure. And God, you see these hands today. We recognize, God, that we want to be the pure ones. We want to be the ones who's seeking after you. God, we want to have ears like Samuel, that we may hear a word from you, Father. Because we don't have all the answers. And forcing people to act a certain way, God, that's not going to help us any either. So may people see your glory, your power, your presence in us as we seek after you and do what you say. Seek after you and do what you say. As you continue to pray, there's some of you here today that you really need to seek after God. You've got decisions in your life. You've got people looking up to you. You've got a hard week that you faced. You really need to seek from God. You really need to hear a word from God. May I pray for you. That's you today. You've got things going on this week. You've got decisions to make, things that you dread. May I pray for you. Would you just slip your hand up? Hands are going up. Thank you. God sees your hands. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, God. Father, I pray that we wouldn't be stressed, but that we would just seek after you. That we would hear clearly from you. God, as we go throughout this week, and it's a time of celebration and the time that we get so excited about, we get to eat and football and honey. God, that we wouldn't put so much emphasis on all this that we'd miss the main point. God, you can bring healing to our families. You can restore relationships that have been broken. God, you are the great physician. You are the great healer. You can touch those marriages, Father God, that right now are rocky. God, you can touch those families, those who are so far from you. God, we pray, our prayer today, that we would hear a word from you. That we wouldn't add to the chaos, but that we would be a light in the chaos. That when other people are worried, they're concerned, we can put our faith and trust in you because we are hearing from you. And we're going to do what you say. As you continue to pray, I'm going to ask you if you just seek God right now. Seek God right now. The thing that Samuel said was, "Speak, Lord. Your servant is listening." Is that your prayer right now? I'm going to be quiet for just a moment, and you're going to hear this music playing in the background. Is that your prayer right now? Speak, Lord. Your servant is listening. God, not what I want, not my agenda, not my purpose, not my plan. Speak, Lord. Your servant is listening. 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 Father God, I pray right now that you touch each and every one that's here, that you touch all those that's watching online today, Father. So we can put so much emphasis on so many different things. There's one thing, God, we're going to leave here with today. That even though there may be chaos out in our world or in our jobs or in our families, things may seem to be dysfunctional, and it looks like that we would have every excuse in the world about why not to do something. We want to be like Samuel, Father. We want to hear a word from you. God, our prayer today is, our heart's desire today is, what we're going to leave with today, Father, is we're going to seek after you. We're going to seek after you and do what you say. As we read our Bibles, as we get on our knees and pray, seek to hear from you and do what you say. So, Father, our hearts, our ears are open. Speak, Lord, for your servants are listening. God, I pray for everyone that's here, that you would do a great work in and through us, that your powerful presence and peace would be felt from this place. And as people go throughout this week, God, I pray your anointing be upon all these gatherings, upon all these dinners, upon all these parties, that we may not forget what's most important. And I pray, Father, that as we gather, we wouldn't force people to do things, but instead we're going to be the light. Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. May we hear a word from you and do what you say. God, I thank you so much for Thanksgiving, for what it means and the reason why we celebrate it. And I pray, Father, that you'd bless these families as they gather, that you can to bless your churches, not just Uplift, Father, but all your churches around, that your great, glorious power would just shine and radiate from these places. God, we're coming upon some of the greatest weeks, in our entire lives as we celebrate Thanksgiving through Christmas and New Year's. And I pray, Father, that we would be that light for other people to see Jesus inside of us. Oh God, how we need to hear a word from you. So I pray, Father, for your people, that we would be that bright light. And as we go to work and as we live our lives this week, God, may people see your power and glory in us, because we're going to seek after you and do what you say. In the powerful name of Jesus we pray. Amen. You got some awesome praise today. God, I love you so very much. You're absolutely amazing. I hope that